Have you ever finished a long day of just thinking and felt absolutely, completely wiped out? Well, today we're going to get into the real science of why your brain gets so tired. And even better, how we can use that science to learn smarter, not just harder. You know that feeling, right? You've been sitting at a desk for hours, maybe staring at a screen, and you feel as exhausted as if you just run a 10K. It feels like it shouldn't make sense, but it turns out that exhaustion is 100% real. And nope, it has nothing to do with your willpower.
So, what is actually going on inside our heads when we hit that mental wall? Let's peel back the layers and take a look.
Yeah, that feeling of being totally mentally fried, that is not you being dramatic. It's a very real, very physical message from your brain. It's basically telling you, hey, I've been working overtime here and I seriously need a break. Okay, so what is the actual price of all that thinking? Let's get into the chemistry of it all. This is probably the best way to think about it. We all know that muscle burn you get from lactic acid when you're doing a tough workout, right? Well, it turns out your brain has its own version of that, a kind of chemical exhaust that builds up after you've been thinking really hard. And that chemical is called glutamate. Now, researchers at the Paris Brain Institute did this incredible study where they found that after about 6 hours of tough, focused mental work, this neurotransmitter starts to build up in your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles all the heavy lifting like decision-making and planning. And here is the kicker. Too much glutamate floating around can actually be toxic for your brain cells. So your brain, in its infinite wisdom, creates that feeling of fatigue as a safety mechanism. It's basically saying, whoa, let's slow down and clear this stuff out before we cause any real problems. And that feeling, that is your brain drain. So we get it. Our brains get tired. But what about those times when we think we're being super productive, like when we're studying for hours, but then it turns out we haven't really learned a thing? Well, it turns out our brains are really good at tricking us. Oh man, this is the worst feeling, and I bet every single one of us has been there. You put in the time, you've got your highlighters going, you reread every chapter, you feel so prepared, but then the test is in front of you, the pressure's on, and poof, the information is just gone. What is going on? It's a complete neurological trap. There's a name for it, the illusion of competence. And it's a cognitive bias where we completely mistake just being familiar with something for actually mastering it. And the sneaky little mechanism behind this illusion is called processing fluency. See, when you reread your notes over and over, the information gets easier and easier to process. It flows. And your brain interprets that ease, that fluency, as a sign that you've learned it. But here's the catch. Recognizing something on a page is a totally different brain process than actively pulling it out of your memory. And this slide just cuts right to the heart of it. On the one side, you've got all these passive things, right? Highlighting, rereading. They feel so productive because they give you that smooth, easy feeling of fluency. But real, lasting learning, that's active. It's kind of hard. It's about forcing your brain to do the work of retrieving the information, not just glancing at it again. And look, this isn't just some pop psychology idea. As researchers Finn and Tober put it so well, that feeling of ease is a powerful signal, but it's also a deeply misleading one. We just can't trust it to tell us if we've actually learned something. So if we can't trust that comfy, easy feeling of fluency, what are we supposed to do? Well, the solution is a strategy called active recall, and it's all about making things a little bit harder for yourself. This right here is the antidote to the illusion of confidence. Retrieval practice literally just means closing the book and testing yourself. Using flashcards, trying to explain a concept out loud to your dog, whatever it takes. You are forcing your brain to pull that information out of storage, not just look at it again. And this is where the magic really happens. See, every single time you successfully retrieve a memory, you're not just confirming that you know it. You're actually rewiring and strengthening that memory. You're making it more durable for the future. It's like instead of just looking at a map, you're paving a superhighway directly to that information in your brain. And this is where it gets really, really cool. The power of this technique is most obvious when the pressure is really on. Let's look at how this can actually make your memory stress-proof. So get this, a brilliant study at Tufts University set up this perfect comparison. They had one group just reread the material over and over, the classic passive method. The other group used active retrieval. They took practice tests. Then they did something kind of mean. Right before the final exam, they put half of each group under a ton of stress. We're talking surprise speeches, hard math problems in front of judges, the works. And the results were just, wow, absolutely staggering. You can see it right here. Under stress, the performance of the restudy group completely tanked. But the group that did retrieval practice, their scores barely budged. Their memory held rock solid, almost as if they weren't stressed at all. Just let that sink in for a second. The way they learned didn't just help them remember more stuff. It built a memory that was resilient, a memory that they could still access even when their heart was pounding and their stress hormones were spiking. They had literally stress-proofed their knowledge. This quote from the researchers who ran the study just says it all, doesn't it? It is not about grinding for more hours. It is about using your study time in the right way. So the big takeaway here is pretty clear. Our brains are wired to be lazy. They love the path of least resistance, chasing that easy, comfortable feeling of fluency. But real, durable, stress-proof learning, that happens when we push back, when we embrace the struggle of retrieval. So the question for you is, now that you know the difference, what hard thing are you going to choose to learn the right way?